Okej, lätt kill. Okej, hur slår man så här? Kan man slå? Man kan slå varmt också. Okej. Åh nej, jag råkade ta super. Jag glömde bort om jag inte kan hoppa. Okej, det var ju någon som var hitåt, eller hur? Det var ju folk som fightade så här. Kom ihåg, där framme, där. Okej, vänta. Jag måste bort kullen. Supergrej. Och sen lasra. Kan vi... Oh my god, vad sjukt! Lasra! Vad sjukt! Oh my god, jag älskar det här! Det här är så kul, vänner. Vi kan springa, va? Där borta är så någon som är långt bort. Där. Det är superhoppa. Och sen, där. Hello! Oh my god! Nej, jag råkar superhoppa. Jag glömmer bort hur vi kan hoppa, det är så svårt. Men vad spelar det för om vi kan lasra? Vi kan okej, där tog lasra slut. Kan vi... Haha, de får ett slag! Brorsan! Superhoppa. Alltså, vad är det som händer? Det är sjukt! Kan vi bara åka igenom den här byggnaden? Det kan vi. Vad galet. Bara rensa hela byggnaden, vi hoppar upp där. Hej då huset! Vad sjukt! Det var någon fett! Det var ju någon där! Fett synd! Okej, det där gör de. Okej, sånt som skjuter på oss. Det är någon stenar alltså. Okej. Vi har tappat mycket HP. Vi når inte. Sluta. Knas. Vi nådde inte alltså. Och vi kan inte öppna dörrar. Knas, vi behöver liv. Dö. Tack, vi fick liv. Räknas ut illa. Okej, så vi måste akta oss för folk på långt avstånd. De är farliga alltså. Hör folk är framme. Någon som skjuter. Tutan är sämst i världen. Vart är han?
Still using a default browser that looks so boring? Switch to Opera GX, the first browser built for gamers. Match your setup colors with specially designed themes, wallpapers, and RGB integration. Get rid of FPS drops with built-in RAM and CPU limiters. Keep an eye on the most exciting game releases. Never miss the best deals and free games with GX Game Corner. Stay connected with integrated Twitch, Discord, and messengers. Step up your game. Download Opera GX now.
Där. Nej.
Jag kan inte aima mig.
Upp.
Ja, det är pappan som får då.
Sorry, Polan. Kan vi stå sönder? Nej. Vad hände där? Okej. Vi fick det. 9 kills av det, är helt sjukt alltså. Det är så kul. Superladda. Wow. Okej, jag når inte. Och vi kan inte dra oss dit. Okej. Spring dit, så hoppar vi och dödar honom borta. Okej. Superladda. Och sen... Nej! Okej. Oj. Vart är du? Vart ska du någonstans? Vad gör du?
Hallå?
Ingenting. Lugazuk. Den där fighten inte vi tar. Längst upp på Portafort på högsta berget.
Hej och välkomna till mat!
Sin hamburgare, då kanske jag kan ha lite.
Det är att ta andras idéer och göra dem lite.
Hamburgerrestauranger. De har mest omsättning i Sverige och därför är de även den bästa hamburgaren. Och jag har kombinerat dem till en så kallad Thanos Infinity Gauntlet-burgare.
Det var jättetorr.
Det ser ut som han har ont.
Nu är det Jennifer.
Nu är det min tur. Alla ska testa min hamburgare och jag är det är en vegetarisk. Okej.
Med rökt majonnäs, karamelliserad lök.
Men den höll ändå en bra standard för den var väldigt fräsch. Victor, din burgare var tyvärr äckligast.
Men jag fattar inte.
Jo,
Den är ju samma upp och ner som den är.
Det handlar inte om det. Victor, du är tyvärr den första som får lämna den här tävlingen.
Det var så kul att vara tillsammans med er.
Jennifer, Din burgare smakar väldigt mycket lök. Och det blir lite för mycket. Så tyvärr.
Jag måste ta burgaren.
Får ju du också indirekt sparken.
Va?
Fucking fish, oh bang you mother!
Okej, så det var vinst eller ingen lön.
Ja, hejdå.
Ni båda gjorde smashburgers. Ni båda delade bord. Men ändå. Stor skillnad mellan era burgare. Joel,
Ja.
din burgare har någonting jag verkligen tycker om. Din burgare. Bacon. Den var väldigt krispig. Vinnaren av matfighten är Emil.
Det kan inte stämma!
Just nu tripplar vi din första insättning upp till 3000 kronor. Och ger dig 10 stycken hyperspins. Snabb registrering och alltid uttag i hyperfart. Vi ses på hyper.com.
Hej och välkomna tillbaka till Matfighten. Idag ska vi se vem i... Oj! Killar jag ville! På en gång! Jag är sjuk i huvudet eller? Oh my god! På en gång så fuckar han upp. Din jävla idiot!
Grilltema.
Jag heter Joel Adolfsson och jag kommer ta dig igenom det här avsnittet som kommer vara fullspäckat.
I den senaste Matfighten så togs titeln ifrån mig av den ondskefulla Jennifer. Men jag hoppas idag kunna besegra henne och återigen bli Matfighten-mästaren.
Matfighten!
That's no luck, you're not good bro if you fought that.
Det är inga prispengar, alltså vad är det?
Men när kommer prispengarna?
Oh, you're teaming like... I bet your mothers, I bet you both mothers. In the same bed.
Oh my god, han förstör. Jag kommer att göra en klassisk beer can chicken. Öl här är alkoholfri så att jag också kan sippa av den lite medan jag jobbar. Som tillbehör till den kommer jag inte ha någon kolhydrat, någonting som gör den alldeles... Utan jag ska göra en liten enkel coleslaw. Det kommer bli nice, det kommer bli nice. Den kommer ha en jäkligt härlig rub på sig. Och den kommer... Victor, vad fan!
Jag spiller ut Joels kaffe! Nej, Emil,
Jag brände mig.
gjorde du?
Ja.
Hellre hatad än älskad. Det är mitt motto.
Ja, vi kör.
Jag ska göra kycklingspett. Sen så ska jag göra en romesco-sås till det också. Foliebakad potatis och sallad. Alla mina element är grillade. Jag ska försöka använda grillen så mycket det bara går. Grill!
Här är min lilla halva av bordet. Jag har ju sett nu att det ska köpas kyckling till 2 stycken av de här människorna. Då kan ju inte jag komma med kyckling också. Jag måste dassla Ara med någonting nytt. Majskolv. Jag har inte gjort det här innan, men det ska vara en majskolv som är liksom smörjd med en massa andra saker på. Så det är planen med den. Och sen så tror jag att vi ska ha lite potatis i ett knyte. Jag hörde att Emil också kanske har tänkt det, men ja, det kommer bli en halloumi också.
Vad är det man tänker på när man tänker på grill? Chili con carne! Korv, kött, sådana saker. Jag tänker ett steg längre.
Vad fan har chili con carne med grill att göra? Det är som en gryta, vad fan?
Alltså han borde bli diskad.
Vad ska ni göra åt saken? Ska ni döda mig? Ja, lycka till. Den här videon är inspelad. Jag har lök. Jag har buljong. Vad ska jag ha? Buljong? Ja, buljong. Jag har mer buljong. Jag är så trött på att vara den enda i den här gruppen som tänker till ett steg till. Och jag hoppas att någonstans har jag även kött.
Köttfärs.
Vart är kött?
Innan tävlingen börjar så måste såklart grillen tändas. Och det kommer självklart följa med i min slutgiltiga bedömning.
Det första vi ska göra är att tända grillen.
Jag är ju grillmästaren i gänget. Jag har mest erfarenhet av grill.
The Gestapo for standing in the way of Germany's greatness. The standard greeting changed, and you could be sent to a concentration camp for not using it. This way, it seemed like everyone was a Nazi supporter. If you dared oppose Hitler, or speak out against him in any way, or filled him with hatred and a thirst for vengeance, a political movement, tragic global conflict, otherwise known as...
This video was Britain and France wanted to avoid a repeat. Just before France fell, Italy finally
damage, but Hitler was. This video was made possible by Skillshare, an online learning community. Stick around until the end of the video to learn how you can get an exclusive deal just for oversimplified viewers. So what else is happening? Well, when I said Britain was all alone, that wasn't entirely true. Many Commonwealth nations and other allied colonies had joined the war in Britain's support. They would play a key role throughout the war, particularly in the African and Italian campaigns. On the Axis side, Germany, Italy, and Japan signed the Defensive Tripartite Pact, bringing their military alliance even closer together. The Soviet Union's war against Finland should have been an easy victory, but it became a again for the winter and wait until spring? No. Keep going. But oil is literally freezing inside our vehicles. That's fine. Keep going. We're having to leave the corpses of our frozen horses by the side of the road so we can still find our way in the snowdrift. Perfectly normal. Keep going. Hitler hadn't given his millions of men winter clothing and supplies because he thought he really should have won by now. Then, Stalin called in troops from the Siberian front, specially trained to fight in the extreme cold, and the Germans were no match. They were now being pushed back. They had no choice but to dig in and wait for winter to end. Germany's victories were staggering, and Japan was eager not to miss the victory bus. Their war in China had come to a standstill, but they wanted to keep expanding their sphere of influence and getting those sweet, sweet raw materials. Roosevelt had no choice but to declare war on Japan, and so did Churchill. Hitler then declared war on America, even though he totally didn't have to. The attack on Pearl Harbor seemed like a big Japanese victory, but they didn't attack any of the naval repair yards, fuel storage tanks, or the submarine base, meaning the Pacific Fleet would be up and running again pretty soon. In the meantime, though, the Japanese were able to begin their conquest. They took Guam, the Gilbert Islands, Wake Island, Hong Kong, and the Philippines. They forced Thailand to join them so they could march their troops through to Malaya. They swept through Singapore, North Borneo, the East Indies, New Guinea, the Solomons, and they were now threatening northern Australia and the borders of India. Japan's victory had been as staggering as the Germans, and it reinforced the Japanese idea that this was a divine war which they were destined to win. But their victories had been based on speed, not power, and power would eventually catch up with them. For now, though, in all occupied nations, the people suffered. Persecution, forced labor, harsh punishments for any who spoke out against their occupiers. In Europe, the Nazis were rounding up ethnic minorities and other unwanted groups and individuals. In particular, millions of Jewish people would suffer through the terrible events of the Holocaust. Brave resistance movements rose up in defiance of their invaders, while the people held out for hope. And hope was coming. Winter was over, and Hitler could continue his push eastward. But this time, he switched up his strategy.
Greetings, friends. This is not to put fire!
He wanted to focus on the south.
Dude, I bet your mother shouldn't don't laugh, bro.
Full of oil, and then invade the Caucasus and take all the oil. His forces moved across the north with ease, and Hitler got cocky. He rerouted the 4th Panzer Army south early, leaving the 6th Army to complete the encircling movement alone. To do so, the 6th Army had to reach and take the key Soviet city of Stalingrad. The Russians defended it fiercely, and Stalingrad saw some of the harshest fighting of the entire war. The Soviets held up the German advance for 5 months as they battled in the war-torn city, which bought them valuable time. When the Germans had first launched their invasion a year earlier, the Soviets had moved their factories to the east. Those factories had been building a butt-ton of tanks and aircraft and getting the Soviet army up to scratch. Now, it was ready. Stalin gathered his new and improved forces around the city, and in an attack that resembled Hitler's own encirclement tactics, they began surrounding the 6th Army. Hitler's commanders came to him and said, "Hey, maybe we should retreat." But Hitler said, "No, you stay." The entire 6th Army was trapped and had to surrender. With complete air superiority, the Soviets started pushing westward. For Stalin, it was a resounding victory. For Hitler, an absolute catastrophe. Things also weren't looking too good for Hitler to stop any German reinforcements. Burned down the White House. But when all was said and done, while Nicholas had been busy playing with his new best friend, tensions in Europe had been rising. It just so happened that in 1914, one Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary went for a drive with the top down in Sarajevo. One thing leads to another, and suddenly Russia found itself at war with half of Europe. A wave of patriotism swept through Russia. The capital was renamed to Petrograd because St. Petersburg sounded a bit too German. Even revolutionaries were getting on board.
That's you so lucky that you hit there, bro. So lucky.
Their big stinky imperialist replaced by a foreign one. So pretty much everyone wanted Russia to win. I hope Russia loses. Geez, read the room, Lenin. Lenin hoped Russia would lose because that would help him overthrow the Tsar. As long as he did that, who cares if Germany blows up half the country? And blow up half the country, they did. An inefficient Tsarist government meant there were shortages for 9 months, but those 9 months were chaos. The people wanted Russia out of World War I, but Minister of War Alexander Kerensky thought instead of doing that, why not do the exact opposite? If the people saw more Russian victories, they'd have to support the new government, and that went just about as well as you might expect. These heavy defeats worsened the Russian economy and made the hungry people hungrier. And by now, I think you know what comes next. They trashed the place. More looting, more rioting, more violence. It was like the Tsar had never abdicated. Tens of thousands of armed workers took to the streets during some of the worst violence Petrograd had seen yet. And in response, Kerensky called in the troops, who opened fire on the demonstrators. For now, Lenin and other Bolshevik leaders wanted to distance themselves. German wife and a homeless wizard. Duh. Nicholas declared himself commander-in-chief and went to the front lines, leaving his German wife in charge while they were fighting the Germans. It wasn't a good look. And because Alexander was so close to Rasputin, people believed that he was actually calling the shots and secretly destroying Russia, and maybe even boinking her. An even worser look. At this point, a bunch of nobles just couldn't take it anymore. Rasputin is destroying the country. We have to break his magic spell over the Tsar. But how? He's magic. Dude. Very cool. Hey, it's Rasputin. The sexy party is running a little late, but in the meantime, why don't you try one of these totally not poisoned cakes? Dude, why'd you say it like that? He's totally gonna know they're poisoned now. Shut up. I said they're not poisoned. Dude, he just ate so much poison. How is he still alive? It must be the magic. Go with plan B. Is he dead? See, Boris? I told you he was the Antichrist and you didn't believe me. Can you shut up for 1 minute and help me roll him up? Are you sure he's dead? I don't know, but I'm supposed to be hosting a charity auction right now. Can we get this over with? Okay, now he's dead.
Karamazhenkov! Belikov! Mahmoud! What's up, dog? What a kid?
What is Outplay? You play and it records. You can choose exactly what you want it to record, whether it be kills, assists, deaths, wins, just the action, which saves you a lot of recording space. And it's all neatly organized, which saves you time too. The list of games is huge. Just to mention a few, it works with games like Valorant, Apex, Splitgate, Rocket League, Dota 2, the list goes on. You can record the whole session or match, so you have that option too. There's an inbuilt editor so you can.
The murder of Rasputin, just like his life, is shrouded in mystery and speculation. He probably didn't really die like that, but he also probably didn't really heal people. He probably didn't influence the Tsar as much as people thought. He probably wasn't secretly destroying the country. But what he definitely did do, even in his death, was ruin the Tsar's reputation. Russia's autocracy looked more outdated than ever, and the Russian people seems to be a little more underwhelming. The Bolsheviks just kind of walked into key buildings in the city and took control. Bolsheviks supporting sailors even brought in a huge battleship, but there wasn't really any fighting. Nobody really tried to stop them. In just one day, they took control of the city. Next, Kerensky just managed to escape before the Bolsheviks surrounded the Winter Palace, placing the provisional government under siege inside. Is it safe to come out yet? I think so. Fear my revolutionary might! Give me that. That night, Lenin came out of hiding to play a bigger role in the revolution. With him back at the helm, they had one more job to do: storm the Winter Palace and arrest the provisional government. And here comes the final showdown. The palace was defended by a force known as the Battalion of Death, who immediately gave up. And just like that, Lenin had won. As far as violent, bloody revolutionary uprisings go, this wasn't really one of them. But Lenin was finally in charge of Russia. He had spent his whole life dreaming of this moment. He set up the first Council of People's Commissars, his own cabinet with him in charge. This was it, his chance to finally make his communist utopia with equality and freedoms beyond compare. Hey Lenin, before we took power, they were planning on holding elections. Shall we go ahead with those? Of course. You can't have a communist utopia without high levels of political participation. The proletariat should be freed or we lost. What? The social revolutionaries won. We lost. Those don't count. Lenin claimed the elections were unfair, and the Constituent Assembly they created was counter-revolutionary. He presented the new assembly with a motion that basically said, sign here and give up your power. And when the assembly was like, no, Lenin said, see, they're disobeying me. Proof they're counter-revolutionary. Shut it down, boys.
Moderate socialists and others weren't happy when Lenin had the assembly closed by force, and when campaigners began taking to the streets, they were fired upon. For Lenin, setting up a communist utopia was looking suspiciously like setting up a dictatorship. While he was implementing many of the communist policies you'd expect, he was also refusing to work with other political parties and cracking down on opposition. Hey Lenin, are you setting up a dictatorship? I'll shoot you if you are. Of course not. What a crazy theory. Anyway, I'm pleased to announce I'm setting up a secret police force to repress and kill traitors. And by traitors, I of course mean anyone not loyal to me. Owie, 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 owie. The assassination attempt made on Lenin's life in August 1918 failed. But in response, the Bolsheviks ramped up their oppression. But while all of this chaos was erupting back home, Lenin and the boys were also distracted by another problem. They were still at war with the Germans, and they had promised to give the people peace. So Lenin made Trotsky Commissar for Foreign Affairs and sent him off to negotiate a peace deal with the Germans. The Germans offered Trotsky really harsh terms, you know, because they were winning the war. They demanded Russia give up a butt-ton of land, something that would be devastating to the economy. Look, I know it's not great, but I think we have to accept it. Are you insane? This will ruin us. Hey Trotsky, you got a big brain. What do you think? How about no war, no peace? What's that, Mr. Trotsky, sir? It's simple. No war means we'll stop fighting the Germans, but no peace means we won't sign the peace treaty either. Then, when the Germans say we've just stopped fighting, they'll have to leave us alone or something. Trotsky, that's genius. I could kiss you. Do you want me to kiss you? Stop asking me that. Trotsky's no war, no peace plan was a huge success. Oh, wait, no, just kidding. It went exactly as you'd imagine. When the Germans saw the Russians
Fuck you! You diesel! Get no money! You're fucking bored!
Russian territory with no resistance. Now, the new peace treaty offered by the Germans was way worse, with Russia losing a huge amount of territory, population, and resources. The Bolsheviks had no choice but to accept, and Russia was humiliated. With Petrograd now in an exposed position, Lenin moved the capital to Moscow, just in case. Things really weren't going well for Lenin, and many people were extremely unhappy with the Bolshevik government and its actions. Lenin, you've pissed off so many people that they've united against you. We're under attack. Relax, we always expected some counter-revolutionary pushback. I think we can handle a few angry Monopoly men. But Lenin, it's not just the Monopoly men. Okay, who are we up against? Well, the liberals, the social revolutionaries, national separatists in Poland, Finland, and the Ukraine, independent warlords setting up chiefdoms, anarchist rebels, the Green Peasant Armies, the Cossacks, the Caucasian states, the Baltic states, the British, the French, the Americans, and the Japanese. Oh, and a legion of Czechoslovakian soldiers seem to have taken over the Trans-Siberian Railway and stolen all the imperial gold reserves. What? How could this get any worse? Oh, and it says here your mother-in-law is coming to stay. No! Not even Nicholas himself. You've probably been wondering what Nicholas has been up to this whole time. Well, after his abdication, he and his family were placed under house arrest. At first, they were allowed to live in their usual luxury, but after Lenin took over, their conditions worsened. The Bolsheviks were just holding on to Nick until they could work out what to do with him, but the Civil War complicated things. The last thing they wanted was for Nick to be freed by the White Armies. And so, to stop this from happening, Nicholas's Bolshevik guards decided to act. It's not entirely certain whether Lenin ordered it, or if the guards were acting on their own volition. Nicholas and his family, in the middle of the night, and brought them into the basement. There, a drunken squad of Bolsheviks murdered the entire family. Nicholas, the last Tsar, once one of the most powerful men alive, had met a brutal end. Victorious. Wow. Well, it's worthless. Until happened, and in 1921 party system, everybody assumed Trotsky when anyone expected to take over was Stalin. Stalin wasn't a great intellectual like Lenin, or a charismatic war hero like Trotsky. He was, as one Menshevik described him, a gray blur. Someone who operated in the background. Someone who you might not even notice. But it was in the background that Stalin would rise to power. Here's how it happened. After the revolution, all the Bolsheviks hoped to get a cool job in the new government. What did you get? Commissar for War. Sweet! What'd you get? Secretary. Stalin was made general secretary for the Communist Party. It wasn't what he wanted, but Stalin quickly realized that even though it wasn't fancy, it was a powerful position. As secretary, he had the power to give people jobs within the party. So he would give jobs to all of his pals, who in turn would give him their support. The more pals he gave jobs, the more power he got. The more power he got, the more pals he got. Lenin may have been having wall-to-wall strokes, but he was still involved in the party, and he was taking notice. He wasn't a fan of Stalin abusing his position, or insulting his wife to her face. Lenin knew he couldn't let Stalin take over, but by this stage, he was just too sick to fight it. Hey man, tell whoever's in charge of giving people jobs not to let that jerk Stalin become the next leader. By the way, who did I put in charge of giving people jobs? That would be Stalin, sir. Blah. Whoa. Deja vu. Lenin's last wish was to not let Stalin take over, but by the time he died, Stalin was too powerful to remove. He had his remaining opponents arrested or killed. Trotsky was banished and fled to Europe. Eventually, he would be assassinated by Soviet spies in 1940. Our dear comrade Lenin has died. We should have a state funeral. No. Let's mummify him and put him on display so people can look at his dead body forever. That's gross. You're gross. Guards, kill him. Lenin had waited so long to take control in Russia, but he never got to see his communist utopia. His short time in charge was spent dealing with the destroyed Russian economy, World War I, and the Civil War. He was cruel and merciless, but he really did seem to believe communism would make Russia a better place. Stalin, on the other hand, would take the Soviet Union down a different path. If you thought Lenin was a tyrant, well, you ain't seen nothing yet, girl. A secret police state, a rapidly militarizing superpower led by a paranoid man who deeply distrusted the West, would see the world come to the brink of nuclear annihilation. That's right, I'm talking about
I'm playing Conqueror's Blade, an MMO where you can conquer a huge medieval world.
I've decided that in order to sell more merch, I should do a face reveal wearing some of it. So are you ready? Here we go. Boom. New Minimalist and Cold War merch available now, and get the new limited...
His name meant the Man of Steel, making him the original Superman. If Superman fought for the Legion of Doom instead of the Justice League, he helped spur the revolution against Russia's czarist dictators, championing the cause of the common man. His dream was to create a state where everybody had access to the means of production, and companies shared equitably with their employees, instead of exploiting their labor for themselves. Yet, somewhere along the line, Stalin's young idealistic thoughts darkened, and he launched the Soviet Union into decades of tyranny, in many ways worse than what the Tsars had ever brought to the Russian people. Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin needs little introduction. He ruled the Soviet Union as dictator from 1922 until 1953, arising to the post of General Secretary shortly after the death of Vladimir Lenin. Both men had initially championed the views of Karl Marx, German communist philosopher who yearned for a system in which the common man was treated fairly by the runaway capitalist powers of his day. Early in the revolution, both Lenin and Stalin espoused these values and sought to build an equitable communist state. However, very quickly, the political reality of their revolution saw both men begin to betray the values of Marx, twisting communism into a means for seizing and holding on to power for themselves. Stalin, however, would be the one to ultimately destroy Russia's chance at true communism and pervert the ideals of Marx to the rest of the world, recognizing that he would be an unchecked dictator if allowed to seize power. On his deathbed, Lenin warned the Communist Party about Stalin's ambitions and did not endorse him for leadership after his death. Stalin was a shrewd politician, though, and had worked to play his enemies against themselves, fading into the background of conflicts he started, only to materialize as the solution toward the end of the conflict. Upon Lenin's death, he opposed Leon Trotsky's ideals of exporting the workers' revolution abroad, and instead focusing on the Soviet Union alone. Soon, all the power in the Soviet Union centered around him, and he established himself as dictator for life. To understand Stalin's evil, you have to understand the Soviet Revolution itself. First, though, it's important to know the difference between Stalinism and communism. Often, and mostly because people don't like to read books, the world is viewed as communism versus democracy, as if the two were completely opposite entities on either end of the political spectrum. Democracy means liberty for the individual, while communism means mindless servitude. Yet this comparison couldn't possibly be more wrong, and that's chiefly because the entire idea of communism was developed by Marx as a means of saving democracy. After the French Revolution, a growing socialist movement grew concerned that runaway capitalism would completely undermine a democracy. It was feared that the concentration of wealth amongst the rich elite would allow them to wield considerably more influence than the common man in a democratic system, and in essence, make their votes exponentially more powerful. Fast forward to modern America, where in the 21st century the concept of super PACs was approved of by the American Congress, allowing undisclosed individuals and even corporations to